Everyone asks me the same thing, and they always ask it the same way, leaning in a little like the answer will be worth the lean. They ask why a tug. Out of the whole long human record, the dreadnoughts, the carriers with their gun decks stacked like cathedrals, the marine cutters that could crack a moon, why is the first ship the galaxy ever set eyes on a salvage tender with a bad reactor and a name half its crew couldn't spell? They want it to be a secret. They want me to tell them the Ondine was something more than she looked, that she had teeth in her hull we never showed. I've stopped disappointing them gently. She was a tug. She was old when I signed onto her and older when we made the run, and everything you have heard about that day starts with that one plain fact and gets no grander from there. I was her cargo master. On a ship that size, the title is a joke and a courtesy both. There were 6 of us aboard, and I was the one who knew where things were stowed and how much the spine could pull before the cables started to sing. The others called me the mate. I was past 50 then, which for a spacer is old enough to have stopped expecting the universe to make a point of me. That's the part the young ones never believe. They think a man who did what we did must have wanted his name in it. I wanted the run to end. I wanted to be home with my boots off. That is the honest beginning of it, and I won't polish it. We were 3 weeks out of the reach, hauling a dead ore hauler we'd cut loose from a rock it had wedged itself against, and we were tired the way you get tired at the tail of a long contract, when the ship starts to feel like a suit you've worn too many days. Captain Os had the watch. Devri Osso, Dev to the crew, captain to the log, was a small hard woman with white in her braid and 40 years of other people's disasters behind her eyes. She'd bought the Ondine outright after the last company that owned her tried to scrap her, and she loved that ship the way you love a bad knee, complaining, and never once considering life without it. It was Nia who caught the first of it. Nia 4 was our deckhand, 19, all elbows, the kind of young that hasn't yet learned the sky can't be argued with. She had the sensor board because it was the quiet watch and Dev liked her to practice on the quiet ones. She sat up straight in a way that made the back of my neck go cold before she'd said a word. "Captain, I've got a lot of something." Dev came off her chair without hurry, which was how she came off her chair when it mattered. Define a lot. Signals, hundreds, more than hundreds. Nia's hands were moving now, trying to make the board resolve what it was seeing. They're stacked, right on top of each other, distress bands, all of them. Different, Captain, they're not ours. None of them are ours. I remember the compartment going still around that word. Ours. Out at the human edge you carry a small certainty in your chest without ever nomming it, that the things you meet will be things you know. Human ships, human trouble. The occasional automated relic from before the reach was mapped. We had never in the whole run of our history met a voice that wasn't kin. We'd looked. We'd sent probes and listened at the dark and gotten back the dark's own silence, and after enough years of that, a people stops leaning toward the window. We had decided, without deciding, that we were alone. "Put it on the main," Dev said. Nia put it on the main, and the compartment filled with a sound I have never been able to describe to anyone's satisfaction, though God knows I've tried. It wasn't language. It was too many languages, or one language spoken by too many throats at once, all of them past the edge of what they could bear. There is a particular texture to a sound made by a great number of living things that all understand, at the same moment, that they are going to die. You don't need the words. The words are the last thing you need. I had heard a piece of that texture before, small, in a decompression on a mining barge when I was young. This was that, multiplied until multiplication stopped meaning anything. "Kill it," Dev said, quiet, and Nia killed it, and the silence after was worse. Tam came up from the reactor deck wiping his hands, drawn by the look of the ship, the way an engineer feels a fever in his own vessel. Tam Ridge had been with Dev longer than any of us, a wide, slow man who spoke to the reactor more kindly than he spoke to people and got better results for it. He looked at the board over Nia's shoulder, and his face did the thing a face does when it stops arguing. "That's a lot of ships," he said. "That's a lot of ships in a bad place." The bad place had a name. though none of us knew it yet. On the chart it was a gap, a threadable lane between two crowded systems, walled on both sides by a debris field so old and so dense it might as well have been rock, streaked through with a radiation belt that would cook an unshielded hull in an hour. The only way from the one system to the other, for anything that couldn't burn a hard, fast line through the belt, was down that lane. Later I would learn the people funneling into it called it by a word that meant, near enough, the throat. You went down it single file, praying, and you came out the other side or you didn't come out. And behind the whole mess of them, chewing up the sky, was the reason they were running. Nia found it because it was the biggest thing on the board and the board kept trying to look away from it. A star, 3 jumps back along the lane, had done the thing stars aren't supposed to do on any schedule a living thing can plan around. It had begun to come apart. Not a clean flash, a cascade, a slow, ugly unspooling that threw a wavefront of hard radiation and stripped matter down the lane like water down a pipe, and the wavefront was moving, and everything in the throat was moving ahead of it, and the things in the throat were slower than the wavefront. That was the whole shape of it. That was the entire arithmetic of that day, and every one of us read it off the board in the same 3 seconds and none of us said it, because saying it wouldn't have added anything. How many? Dev said. Nia swallowed. The board's counting hulls, it's still counting. She made herself look at the number. Call it's past 4,000, small ones, really small. Some of them I don't think are ships, I think they're pods, lifeboats, things people got into. 4,000 hulls of strangers, running down a pipe from a sky that was coming apart, and one battered human tug 3 weeks tired sitting at the mouth of it with a dead ore hauler on the line. I want to tell you I felt something noble. I felt the exact opposite of noble. I felt the specific, sour, bone-deep unfairness of it, the feeling I'd had my whole working life at the worst moments, the feeling that seems to follow a certain kind of small worn-out ship and a certain kind of small worn-out man. Why us? We were nobody. We were a tug. There were surely, somewhere behind those 4,000 hulls, real ships, armadas, powers, whole navies of whoever these people were. And the great weight of the universe had arranged, as it always seemed to arrange, for the one witness at the door to be the least equipped thing in the sky to do a single thing about it. I've never been ashamed of feeling that. I've only ever been ashamed of how loud I felt it while Dev was already doing math. Because Dev was already doing math, I could see it. She had the toe figures up, the Ondine's pull, the spine's load rating, the numbers she'd lived inside for 40 years, and she was running them against 4,000 hulls, and the math was laughable, and she was running it anyway. Captain, I said, Dev, there's nothing we can, that's not a job. That's not a thing a ship can be. I know what she can pull, Dev said, not to me exactly. I know it better than the board does. You know she can pull nothing that matters against that. We drag out 50 of them and the wavefront takes the rest and takes us with the 50. That's the run. That's the whole run. She didn't answer because she was still counting, and that was when the far mouth of the throat lit up. Nia made a sound. Tam said something under his breath in the old dockside way, the way men swear when swearing is a form of prayer. Because the far end of the lane, the safe end, the end the 4,000 were running toward, was no longer empty, and it had not been empty, and we simply hadn't been able to see past the noise. It was full. It was full of ships the way a coastline is full of cliff. I had never seen a warship that wasn't human, and my first thought, God help me, was that I still hadn't, because these things did not read to my eye as ships at all. They were black, and they were vast. And they were arranged. That was the thing that turned my stomach, the arrangement, the way they held a formation across the whole mouth of the lane, with a geometry so exact it looked less like a fleet than like a decision. Dozens of them in the front rank alone, each one bigger than anything in the human record, each one plated in something that drank the light of the dying star behind us and gave nothing back. They weren't running. They weren't part of the 4,000. They had come from the safe system, the destination system, and they had come out to the mouth of the throat, and they were sitting there, holding, while the fragile, ragged column of the dying poured toward them. "They're not helping," Nia whispered. "Why aren't they helping? They're right there." They weren't helping. I understood it before I had a single fact to hang the understanding on, the way you understand a closed door. They weren't there to catch the column. They were there to stop it. The hail, when it came into the Ondine in clean human words, and that was its own small horror, that they'd taken us apart enough in the minutes since we'd blundered into their sky to know how to speak to us. The voice was flat and even and had the quality of something translated by a machine that had been given the meanings but not the reasons. It did not introduce itself. It did not ask who we were. It told us. "Unranked vessel, you are inside a sealed dispensation. The lane is forfeit. Reverse your heading and clear the mouth. The Sarn Dominion extends you the mercy of this warning once." "Sarn," Tam said, tasting it. "That's what they call themselves, Sarn." Dev keyed the reply without asking any of us. "Sarn vessel, this is the human tender Ondine. The lane's full of survivors, thousands. You're between them and clear space. Open a corridor and we'll help you run them through. We've got tow and we've got holds." "The lane is forfeit," the flat voice said again, and there was nothing in it, no cruelty even, which was the part that has stayed with me. Cruelty I could have hated cleanly. "The cascade will reach the mouth. To preserve the systems beyond, the mouth will be closed before it does. What is inside the lane when it closes remains inside. This is understood by all standing parties. You are not a standing party. Reverse." "Closed." I did the geometry and my mouth went dry. They meant to collapse the throat. They had the ships and the ordnance to do it, to bring the ancient debris walls down into the lane, to fuse the whole passage into a plug of shattered rock that the cascade would break against and go no further. It was, I understood even then, not stupid. It was not even wrong, by some cold measure. Seal the throat and the wavefront stopped. Seal the throat and two whole populated systems on the far side lived. The only cost was everything currently inside the throat, and everything inside the throat was 4,000 hulls of the wrong people, the slow people, the ones who'd built their lives in the doomed system and hadn't gotten out fast enough. To the Sarn, that wasn't a cost. It was arithmetic, and they had done it, and they were waiting now with the terrible patience of a thing that has already decided, for the last of the fleeing to funnel into the grave so the grave could be closed neatly, with the door shut only once. "Who are they?" I said. "The ones running, the 4,000, who are they to the Sarn?" Dev had it up. The column had a name too on the bands once you knew to look. "Merit," she said. "The Sarn call the ones running the Merit, small worlds, no fleet worth the word." She looked at the black wall across the mouth and then at the ragged, luminous crawl of the column pouring toward it, and I watched 40 years arrange themselves behind her eyes into a single expression I'd only seen on her a handful of times, and every one of those times had cost us. Client species. Subjects. Something the Sarn keep the way you keep a field. And the field caught fire, and the ones who own it have decided the cheapest thing is to let it burn down to the fence line. "Reverse," the flat voice said a third time. "You have no standing here." And Dev Aso, master of a salvage tug with a bad reactor and a name half her crew couldn't spell, leaned to the pickup and said, in a voice with no heat in it at all, "We're not standing. We're going in. And cut the ore hauler loose off our spine so we'd have the pull for something better, and turn the Ondine down the throat, into the column, into the wavefront, toward the grave the great and reasonable powers of that sky had decided to close." I have gone back over the next hours more times than I've gone back over anything in my life, and I still can't lay them in to end the way you're supposed to be able to lay a story. It didn't happen in a line. It happened all at once and for too long, but I'll give it to you the way it comes. The first thing about going into that column was that it stopped being 4,000 hulls and became, one at a time, an endless procession of individual small ruined ships, each one a household, each one a decision someone had made in a hurry to save whatever they could still reach. We came up on the tail of the column first, the slowest, the worst off, the ones the wavefront would take first, and they were pitiful. Barges with cargo doors welded half shut over too many people. Ferries meant for short hops between orbitals. Running engines, they weren't built to run for lanes they weren't built to cross. Pods. Actual pods, single-soul lifeboats, drifting in loose clusters where a bigger ship had cracked and spilled them, their little beacons all crying the same cry on the same band. And the Merit themselves, I saw them first through the tug's forward scopes as we came alongside a stalled ferry with a dead drive, saw them crowded at its viewports looking out at us, and my chest did something I wasn't ready for. They were not like us. I want to be clear that they were not like us, because the easy version of this story makes them just like us, and it's a lie, and the lie cheapens what they were. They were long and pale and jointed wrong, to my eye, and they moved in a slow, rippling way, and where a human face would be they had a cluster of soft light that dimmed and brightened, and when a great many of them were frightened at once, the lights all went the same low, guttering amber, and it was the most human-feeling thing I have ever seen a thing that wasn't human do. They were packed into that ferry past any count I'd want to swear to. And they saw the Ondine, this ugly-patched human tug none of them had ever laid eyes on, this thing that had come down the wrong way against the flow, and the amber lights all across the viewport went bright, and then brighter, and I understood I was watching hope arrive in a place that had run out of it, and I had to look away, because I did not for 1 second believe we could keep the promise that brightening made. Tam, Dev's voice on the ship channel iron now, the earlier iron doubled. I need the tow drives past their rating and I need them to stay there. Whatever you have to sit on to make that happen, sit on it. They'll cook, Tam said, already halfway down the ladder. Then they'll cook slow, I need slow. Call, Dev turned to me and here it was, the thing I'd been for 30 years without ever needing it to matter this much. The spine's rated for one big pull. I don't want one big pull. I want to turn our whole ship into a cable head. I want to grapple everything that'll hold a line, chain them and drag the chain, and I want you to build me a chain that won't shear the first time I firewall the drives. Can you build me that chain? I looked at the spine schematic. I looked at 4,000 hulls. I felt the old sour unfairness rise up one more time. Why us? Why is it always the ones with nothing? And I let it rise, and then I let it go, because Dev was looking at me and Nia was looking at me, and the amber lights in the ferry viewport were bright. And a man is what he does with the thing that falls on him, whether he asked for it or not. I can build you a chain, I said. It'll be ugly. Give me the whole deck crew and both the loaders, and I don't care what the manual says about any of it. You've never once cared what the manual says about anything, Dev said, and for half a second in the worst sky I was ever in, the old woman almost smiled. Build it. So we built it. I won't pretend I can make you feel the next stretch of hours, but I'll tell you the shape of the work, because the work is the only true thing I have, and because the work is, in the end, the whole of what the galaxy saw. We ran lines. That's it. That's the heroism, if you want the word. We ran lines. We came up on a stalled hull and Nia would put us close enough that I could fire a grapple mag across the gap, and it would take, or it would slip and I'd fire again. And once it took, we'd winch the line taut and chain that hull to the last one, and the Ondine dragged the growing chain down the throat behind her like a slow ox dragging a field of stones. When a hull was too dead to take a line, we cracked it and pulled the living out through the gap into the Ondine's own holds, and the holds filled, and we kept pulling, and they kept coming, hand over long pale hand down the transfer tubes, cold and terrified and packing themselves into cargo space never meant for a single breathing thing, and going bright when they saw more of their people already inside. And above us, the whole time, the black wall of the Sarn sat at the mouth and watched, and did not fire and did not open and did not close and did not leave. That was the thing I couldn't understand in the middle of it. I understood it later. In the middle of it, all I knew was that the seal hadn't come. The wave front was coming. Nia called the range on it every few minutes, and every call was worse, and by any reason the Sarn should already have plugged the throat and pulled back to safe distance and let the whole ugly business end. They hadn't. The mouth stayed open. and a tug full of the wrong species kept crawling down a doomed lane toward them, dragging a chain of the dying, and the greatest power in that sky held its terrible patience and did nothing, and I was too busy to wonder why. The hail came again when we were maybe a third of the way, holds full, chain long, drive screaming under Tam's hands. Ondine different that time, not the flat machine cadence, slower, as if a thing were speaking through the machine instead of the machine speaking for the thing. You cannot clear the lane. Your vessel's capacity is known to us. At your rate of recovery with the wavefront's velocity, you will retrieve perhaps 1 part in 40 before the mouth must close. You are expending your ship and your lives to alter a number that does not matter. Explain the purpose. Dev didn't slow the work to answer. She talked while I ran another line, while Nia flew us gunwale to gunwale with a dying barge, while the drives howled. There's no purpose, she said. You're looking for a purpose. There isn't one. There's people dying and a ship that can carry some of them and a lane that's still open. That's not a purpose. That's just the next thing. A pause on the band, a long one. 1 part in 40, the voice said. You will die for 1 part in 40. We'll get who we can get, Dev said, for as long as the door's open. If you want the number to be bigger than 1 in 40, Sarn, you've got the whole answer sitting in front of you and you've been sitting on it for an hour. Open your holds. You've got 1,000 ships that could each take more than mine in one pass. You could run this whole column clear before the wavefront's in range and never scratch your paint. The door's open because you're keeping it open. I've had an hour to watch you not close it and I'm done pretending I don't know what that means. Part of you is already down here with us. Send the rest. The band went quiet, and it stayed quiet, and we kept working, and I put that exchange out of my head because I had a chain to keep from shearing. We lost the first of them, past the halfway mark. It was a fuel barge, near the head of my chain, one of the biggest hulls we'd grappled, and it had been venting since we took it, and I'd known the line was bad, and there hadn't been a thing in the sky I could do about it except keep pulling and hope. It sheared. The whole forward third of my chain, 9 hulls, I had counted them. I have never stopped counting them, came loose in a slow, terrible peeling and drifted, and the Ondine lurched as the load came off wrong, and Nia fought her level, and I stood at the aft scope and watched 9 hulls full of the living fall behind us into the lane, toward the wave front, and there was no time. There was no time and no line and no pull to spare, and Dev's voice came over the channel flat as a slab. Leave them, call, do you hear me? Leave them and hold the rest. I heard her. I held the rest. That is a thing I did with my own 2 hands in that sky. I let go of 9 hulls of the living to keep the others, and I made the choice in under 4 seconds because 4 seconds was what I had. And I have made it again every night since in the dark behind my eyes, and I have never once gotten it to come out different, and I have never once forgiven the sky for making it mine to make. And then I will tell this part plainly, because it is the hinge of everything, and if I dress it up you won't believe it, and you have to believe it. One of the black ships moved. Not the whole wall. One. It came off the formation at the mouth, and it came down the lane against every reason a warship has, down toward the drift where my 9 lost hulls were falling, and it was so much bigger than them, so much bigger than us, that when it reached them it didn't grapple or tow or do any small human thing. It simply opened. A whole flank of that vast black hull unseamed like a wound, and a field came off it, some handling field we had no word for, and it gathered the 9 drifting hulls the way you'd sweep crumbs into a palm, gentle and total, and drew them inside itself and closed. And then it hung there a moment in the lane, this enormous thing that had just done the one act its entire order held to be beneath it. And I swear, I know how it sounds, I swear it looked as surprised at itself as I was. The band opened, the slow voice again, the thing through the machine. Continue your recovery, it said. We will take the head of the lane. You will take the tail. The warden mark has a pause, and I have wondered ever since what got translated out of that pause, what a machine had refused to render because it had no clean human word for it. The mouth will not close while you are working. That was all. No banner. No surrender because they had not been fighting us. You cannot surrender to a tug. No speech. A working order ship to ship from the greatest power in that sky to the least, and the order was, we'll take the top, you take the bottom, and I won't shut the door on you. And then the whole black wall came alive at once. 1,000 vast ships unfolding their impossible flanks, and the head of the column of the dying. The fast ones, the lucky ones, the ones nearest the mouth, began to vanish into the Sarn the way water vanishes into dry ground. And it was the single most beautiful and most terrible thing I have ever watched, because the only reason it was happening, the only reason those ships had opened, was that they had spent an hour watching a tug they should have brushed aside, refused to do the reasonable thing. And something in the arithmetic of a people who worshipped strength had cracked along a fault line they hadn't known they had. We worked the tail. We worked it until the wavefront was close enough that Nia's range calls stopped being numbers and started being a countdown. And Tam's reactor was past every rating a reactor has, and the deck plates were too hot to kneel on, and I ran lines with my gloves smoking, and the Ondine dragged her ugly chain of the saved up the last of the throat, while the sky behind us came apart. And Tam Ridge did not come up from the reactor deck. He'd been holding the tow drives past their limit for hours, and past a limit there is a place a limit becomes a fact, and the fact came for the aft drive in the last minutes, and Tam was down there with it because that was where Tam was always going to be. He kept it lit. Whatever he did down there in the last of it, he kept the aft drive lit long enough for us to pull the final hulls clear of the wavefront. And the thing that killed him was the thing that saved the last 200 souls on my chain, and there was no separating the two, and I have stopped trying. Dev knew before the rest of us. She went very still at the board, and she did not say his name, and she flew her ship, and I understood from her stillness, and I ran my last line with my crewman dying below me, and I did not stop, because he would have come up the ladder and thrown me down it himself if I'd stopped to grieve him, while there was still a hull on the wrong side of the front. We came out of the throat with the wavefront at our heels and the Ondine gutted, aft drive gone, hull cooked, holds packed with more merit than there is a decent word for, dragging a chain of hulls so long it had its own gravity in the scopes, and the Sarn were there on the safe side, the whole vast black wall of them, and behind them the column of the saved, the fast head and now the slow tail, all of them through, all of them clear, and the mouth of the throat still open behind us. Held open by the great power that had decided, 1 hour and 1 tug too late for it to cost them nothing, to be the thing they'd always claimed to be. They closed it then. With us clear, with the last hull through. The Sarn brought the debris walls down into the throat in a slow, grinding thunder that had no sound in the vacuum and shook every scope anyway. And the cascade wavefront broke against the plug of it and guttered and went nowhere. And the 2 systems beyond lived. And the 4,000 hulls, most of them, most, not all, never all, I carry the not all and I always will. The great most of them lived too, packed into human cargo holds and Sarn ships that had forgotten they knew how to open. And it was over, and Tam was dead, and I sat down on a deck plate too hot to sit on and did not feel it. The Warden Mark spoke to us once more before we parted. That was the rank, we learned, Warden Mark, the one who'd been at the head of that black wall, the one who'd made the call to open. It's she, the translation eventually settled on she, though I never knew what the word meant to them, asked to speak to the master of the Ondine, and Dev took it standing, gray in the face, her ship dying gently around her. I expected, I don't know what I expected, a reckoning, thanks, some grand closing of the loop. What we got was quieter than any of that, and it has outlasted everything grand I've ever heard. We watched you enter a grave we had already closed in our reckoning, the Warden Mark said. We are a people who have always known the shape of strength. We have never once been wrong about it. We looked at your vessel and we knew correctly every measure of it, its mass, its pull, its power, the smallness of it against the thing that was coming. We were not wrong about any measure. A pause. The machine held it and did not fill it. We had simply never measured the one thing. We did not know it was a measure. We are old, tug master, and we are very strong, and until this hour we did not know there was a strength that runs the wrong way down a doomed lane for people it has never met and owes nothing. We know it now. We do not yet know what to do with knowing it, but the door stayed open. Remember that we are the ones who kept it open at the end. It matters to us that you remember we were capable of it once we were shown the shape. Dev looked at that black wall for a long moment. Then she said, "You'll get more practice at it than you think. Take care of the merit. All of them, not the fast ones. That's the practice." And she closed the channel because her ship was dying and her engineer was dead, and she had 4,000 rescued strangers to get to somewhere with air, and she had never in her life had time for the grand version of a moment. They did take care of the merit. That was the beginning of the thing the treaties came out of later, the long, slow contact between us and the Sarn that the diplomats made careers on and got most of the credit for, and they're welcome to it. The diplomats came after. The first contact, the true one, the one the whole long human record now starts its reckoning of the wider galaxy from, was a cargo master firing a grapple line across a gap toward a viewport full of amber lights, and it was Nia 4 flying gunnel to gunnel with the dying, and it was Devry also saying that's not a purpose, that's just the next thing, and it was Tam Ridge keeping an aft drive lit past the place where a limit becomes a fact. People ask me why a tug. I've told you the plain answer, and it's the only one there is, because a tug was what was there. But there's a truer answer under the plain one, and it's taken me all these years to be willing to say it, because it sounds like I'm claiming something and I'm not. It fell to us because it always falls to us. To the small ships. To the worn-out crews at the tail of a long run who didn't ask for it and can't afford it and have every reason in the sky to reverse heading and go home with their boots off. It falls to us because the great powers, the black walls, the reasonable arithmetic, they'll do the sums and close the door every time, until somebody who has no business being there does the wrong thing so loudly and so long that the sums start to look like what they are. We were never the strong ones in that sky. That was the whole point. The Sarn were strong. The Sarn could have run that entire column clear in an hour and never felt it. It didn't fall to the strong. It never falls to the strong. It fell to the ones who'd go, and we were the ones who'd go, and I have stopped asking why us the way I asked it at the mouth of the throat, sour and afraid. I know why us. It's the same reason it'll be you, some tired day, at some door you didn't choose, with everyone stronger than you already revering their heading. Because somebody has to be the one who goes, and the somebody is never the one who could most afford it. It's the one who's there. We were there. Tam is still there, in a way, in every merit who's old now and was a frightened child then in a cargo hold that smelled of hot metal and other people's fear. Dev's gone too since, easy in her sleep, which is more than she'd have believed she'd get. Nia captains her own ship now and does not fly gunnel to gunnel with anything if she can help it, and I don't blame her, and I know she'd go anyway. And the Ondine, they wanted to put her in a hall somewhere after, behind glass, the first ship. Dev wouldn't have it while she lived and I wouldn't have it after. A tug in a glass hall is a lie about what a tug is. We stripped her for parts in the end, and the parts went into other working ships, ugly and patched and out at the edge. And that's where she is now, spread thin across 100 hulls hauling ore and cutting salvage and answering, now and then, some cry on some band that everyone stronger has already done the sums on. That's where she belongs. That's where the first ship the galaxy ever saw belongs, not behind glass, but out there, cooling in some other tug's plating, ready for the next tired crew at the next door they didn't choose. Somebody has to be the one who goes. We were the ones who'd go.